Hey, Bradley.
Hey, brother, just give me 5 minutes. Let me park this car, man.
All right, sounds well.
I'm just returning home. Right. Sorry, man, it's been such a busy day.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
Okay. Okay, have you got me? Okay, bro.
All right. You ready?
Ready.
Excellent. So, you're in Manchester, right?
I am, yes.
Manchester.
Manchester. Got it.
So,
Where are you based?
excuse me?
Where are you based?
I'm actually in Ohio. Do you know where that is? I'm in Cuyahoga, Ohio, which is basically Cleveland,
Okay.
by the Great Lakes.
By the Great Lakes, indeed.
Yeah. So actually, I was gonna let you know that I actually live in Manchester for a little while, a number of years ago.
Yes.
I do a study abroad, so I live on Booth Street West and Oxford Road.
Yeah, man.
At the
That's quite
Manchester.
close.
That's close to you.
Yeah, I live in Moss Side,
Okay.
which is very close to Oxford Street.
Cool. Yeah. So I was at the Manchester Business School.
It's
That was
okay.
that was before the merger with the university. Uh,
Right.
and so beautiful time there.
Yeah.
I tell my friends there are three kinds of weather in England. It just
Yeah.
rained, it's raining, or it's about to rain. But I love it. It makes the grass grow green. I appreciate
He's exotic.
it. Yeah. So are you a United or a City fan?
A City fan, of course. That's a real.
Oh, we might have to end the conversation right here.
All right. Good night. It's been lovely. It's been kind of nice.
Yeah, I know you've had a nice little run for the past few years.
Sure. Yeah. But Manchester United. That's more of an international team in Manchester.
Yeah,
Real Union support Manchester City.
I know. But you know what? When I was at the business school, I was oblivious to the whole thing. And the people at the business school said, "Oh, you got to be a United supporter," because everybody jumped on the bandwagon during those.
Mhm.
That was the days of Beckham and everything. Actually, a little bit before Beckham came up.
Right.
So that was, it was Eric Cantona at that moment. So I became a United supporter, and it's that's just how I stick with it. So, but you know what? The barbershop that I used to go to
Yeah.
in Manchester was like 1 or 2 blocks away from the old stadium where
Okay.
where City used to play.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I'm close to the area. Yes.
okay, cool. So yeah, so I appreciate both, but I gotta stay with my even during these tough
Mhm.
periods that we have the 0-0 draws
Mhm.
and everything else going on. But anyways,
No,
I just
but don't worry, man. You'll come to your sense at some time.
I
It might take a little longer than you think, but
hear you.
I've
I
got
hear you.
faith.
Actually, you know what? I support a number of clubs around the earth, and the club that I support in Australia, it used to be called Melbourne Heart, but the owners of Manchester City
Yeah.
bought the club and
Mm.
renamed it Melbourne City. So there's a little bit of a connection there at this point.
Hello.
But yeah, so how's everything going in Manchester?
Yeah, everything's really good, actually. Thanks, man. Yeah.
Okay.
The life, the business, the project I've been running for 10 years
Yeah.
really well. I self-fund that, so I work at the airport as well.
Okay.
And I'm developing a new project, an element to the project to develop the brand in the coming year. So yeah, it's all very creative and interesting.
Okay.
Mm.
So I learned about mixed a number of years ago, and I know you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
But for those who know less about it and less about the whole mixed race scene in England, can you talk a little bit about that and describe that a little bit?
Yeah, the reason I set Mixed Up was to just give a voice for those people who often don't get involved in academic discussions
Okay.
on mixed race identity. And I don't know what the discussions, how familiar people are with the discussion of mixed race identity outside of the UK, but it tends to predominantly happen around an academic setting.
Okay.
So I wanted, whilst I think that's valuable, I think the academic setting is more of a critique of the subject. With the mixed race conversation, I'm not really looking for problems. I'm just looking for experiences.
Sure.
So I wanted everyday people to have an opportunity where they could add value to those ongoing academic discussions and share their experiences. I thought that would be more useful.
Yeah.
So I did that both from a personal perspective, because I was interested myself, but also to just see if we can widen the conversation. And that went really well. So I've been doing that for the last, as I say, 10 years.
Yeah.
It's all been self-funded, so I've gone around the country and spoken to hundreds and hundreds of young people and older people on the subject of mixed race identity. And then I took that information and codified it into an educational package, which multi-agencies can use if they choose to be enlightened on the subject of mixed race identity, or if there are more young people who want to further that discussion and build on that. I kind of made that a little bit easier, I think.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I definitely appreciate your emphasis on experience, because I know first of all, it can be very hard to find other people who share this experience. And so a lot of times people are go on in life with all these questions and challenges without somebody to talk about it with. And so when somebody does find somebody else often, or finds a community, what I observe with a number of years of experience is that it kind of becomes a gripe session of just complaining about this, that, and the other, which is needed. And I mean, people need to vent and get that out. But it's also beneficial to advance the conversation and to focus just on experience. I think that's beneficial because that's supportive, and a lot of those solutions are intrinsically shared just by sharing the experience, and being positive, and not avoiding the negative or whatever, but just emphasizing the positive in the solutions and just talking about experience and letting the solution speak for itself through that.
Correct. And it's a way of I think it's a better way of rebalancing. As I say, an academic entry point into the discussion is looking for a problem, which I'm not really looking for any problems. I don't think there is a problem. And I think historically we've been sold the notion that mixing is an issue, but it isn't to me and never has been in that respect. So yeah, I think if you can allow people the space to enter at it from a different, or not even looking for an answer, just looking for an open space to have a conversation and to learn and to edit their own thoughts out loud, because it's more of an editing process, isn't it? You have to move from an emotional perspective to an informed perspective.
Right.
And you can do that by listening to others, by talking to others, and ensuring that those others are not trying to find an answer for you, because everyone has different experience on this, a different journey.
Yeah.
There are some similarities, and similarly, there are very, very different experiences around. So I wanted to create a platform where all of those voices could be heard and understood.
Cool.
And yeah, that's kind of worked.
Cool. So to give you a little bit of a background about myself and this project. So I do interfaith work, which is basically building bridges between different religious and ethnic communities. And I also do mixed race, mixed ethnicity advocacy. And I noticed that there tends to be a little bit of a divide between those two fields. And specifically for the mixed community, there tends to be like you said, it tends to be very academic, and in that academic focus, it tends to be very secular, and it tends to abstain from addressing the experience of spirituality or religion or something to that effect. And so the idea with this project of the Mixed Spirit Project is basically to broach that subject, to introduce that experience of spirituality and religion, and how that guides individuals' mixed experience, how that informs people's experience being mixed, and how people find solutions in that respect. So I'm just interviewing a number of friends, and it's kind of like a very informal. I have 5 basic questions, and it's kind of open ended, and just flowing with that. So does that sound all right?
Yeah, that sounds good, man.
Okay, cool. So if there's an absence of anything else, I can just jump into the first question.
Sure, no, go to it, man.
All right, cool. So the first question basically is, what is the ethnic and spiritual background of your father, and what is the ethnic and spiritual background of your mother?
Okay, my mother is white English.
Okay.
Church of England.
Okay.
And my father is black Jamaican.
Ah.
And he would be, I'd like to say, Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay.
Non-conforming Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So very, very simple. We can move on to the second question.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the second question is, what do your parents teach you growing up as a child? Drawing from that background of the Anglican Church and drawing from the tradition of the Seventh-day Adventists, what teachings do your parents share about life, about religion, or that what teachings stand out to you during your childhood?
Okay, from my mother's side, I had very little connection with the church.
Okay.
It was more of a signature on my birth certificate to say that there was this religion in the background, but it wasn't anything that we practiced.
Okay.
But I would say within that, her being a very spiritual individual, she taught me the values of kindness more than anything, and kindness and values of family.
Okay.
My dad, on the other hand, his family were much more into church. So I was raised with my mother.
Okay.
My mother and father split up when I was about 4.
Okay.
And my dad remarried,
Okay.
and I would visit my dad at weekends with his second family. And we would go to church occasionally, but not a lot. But I think we'd always pray before we sat down to eat.
Ah, okay.
Which was interesting, because when I was at my mom's house, we didn't pray.
Okay.
We always, still as a big man, I still pray when I'm with my dad in his house.
Okay.
And I think what I picked up from his lifestyle, and he wasn't a great church goer,
Okay.
but what I picked up was some of those traditions around the values of being respectful and friendships and just being a good human being.
Sure.
How was that communicated? It was inferred rather than indoctrinated upon us.
Yeah.
But I definitely picked it up. I definitely understood that religion was there to guide me in some ways, to focus my attention on the better sides of humanity.
Yeah.
Rather than, it helped me to focus on that.
Yeah.
Wasn't something I was exposed to all of the time, but it was enough for me to connect with and carry that through into adulthood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And when you talk about the teachings or the lessons that are inferred, it makes me think of how much we learn as children, particularly as children, but even as adults as well. But when we're children, we learn a lot from our parents by observing our parents. And so there's the spoken word and the spoken principles and teachings, but there's also the example that our parents set. and just seeing how our parents interact with others. I can, when listening to you, I think about like what my father teaches me growing up, and just when you talk about the kindness and respect. My father would talk with us to a certain extent, but I know a lot of it I learned from him. A lot of what I learned from him is just by watching how he interacted with others and how he was concerned for others, and things like that. So I appreciate you mentioning that notion of the inferred teachings and the focus on respect as well.
I think an observation I made, or I'm able to reflect on it now as an adult, and I wasn't able to articulate it as a child. There were many people around me who attended church on a regular basis, but I would also see them get involved in different manners of different misdemeanors.
Sure. Yeah.
And it confused me. But growing up, I suppose the fact that my mother didn't physically go into church made me feel safe that you can still be a good person. You don't have to be in church.
Mm-hmm.
And that there are equally people who go to church, physically spend time in that space, who don't always perform the right action.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it helped me to balance, to think, well, okay, even if I'm not attending church, I can still be a valuable human being in lots of other ways. And there are people who go to church who, in my observation, weren't being valuable human beings.
Yeah.
But were considered to be more valuable because they attended a church.
Right.
Or they attended a building.
I hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely that resonates with me. Again, thinking about my father, the only time I saw him in a church on one occasion, which was when I was in high school, and the church was hosting like a seminar or some session about how to get scholarships for university. So he attended that session to learn about how to get scholarships. Other than that, that's the only time I saw him in the church. Yeah. But that being said, like you say, you learn how to you learn to observe people's behavior and observe principles in action and principles of righteousness and kindness and respect in what people do on a regular basis, rather than just focusing on like the facade of where a person goes once a day or once a week or whatever else. You see what people's characters are about by observing them continually.
I think I've seen many more acts of compassion happen outside of church. However, people would view that I don't go to church, that I wouldn't understand compassion, observe it. But no, certainly I've seen more outside of church, I would say.
Yeah.
Definitely, from my experience.
Yeah. Well, that's it's a tough lesson to learn in life about hypocrisy or contradiction. And so that kind of segues us into the third question. If we can move on to that, is that cool?
Yeah, cool, man. Right. Yeah.
So the third question is what are some of the challenges that you experienced growing up as a child, as a youth? Some you mentioned observing people who go to church but behaved in another way. What are some of the challenges that you experienced, either in religion or just in life, in community or whatever, as a child and as a youth?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
If I split it up into two sections,
okay.
Shall we say, I experienced a lot of psychological, emotional struggles when I was younger, because I inherited other people's opinions about my mother and father's relationship and about race and identity.
Yeah.
So I internalized external opinions about who I should be or what I should be. So, and also in my education system in the UK, it was very what I call mono heritage. So it was either a black identity or a white identity.
Sure.
And as a young person, I think I was very similar to lots of young people. I just wanted to fit in, but I never felt like I fitted in because I didn't fit into this prescribed single mono heritage identity.
Yeah.
However, with all of the love and great parenting I had from both my parents, they too didn't understand how it felt to be considered not black enough to be black or not white enough to be white.
Okay.
It was as elementary as that. Obviously, when you grow older, you learn more sides of your character and personality and identity. But certainly that was a struggle. That was one of my personal struggles, because to compound it slightly, I had older white brothers as well. So my mum had children before she met my father.
Okay.
So I was looking for some models to follow, and I was looking to find a way to be authentic at the same time. But society was telling me I should choose one racial identity at the exclusion of another. And I didn't know how to overvalue one identity over the other. So I didn't know how to say, well, the black identity is better than the white, or the white identity is better than the black. And there wasn't anybody there to guide me. So on a very personal level, I think that's where my project started many years back.
Yeah.
But it took me time to find a way to bring both sides of my identity into a full identity, and both sides of my parent heritage.
Yeah.
So I could be all of my mother and all of my father in the same person.
Yeah.
But I was very much felt like I was being steered to choose one over the other. So that was a big conflict for a time, which eventually became resolved. And the second question you asked about religion or about conflicts, I suppose I've been slightly suspicious of any denomination which doesn't allow or isn't accepting of other people. So many of the religions I looked into tended to have elements to them which I felt weren't compassionate towards things they didn't understand.
Okay.
And I was unable to. I can reason that now, as I'm a mature, apparently middle-aged man, but I couldn't then. So yeah, those were the conflicts in my head. One was about the social constructs of racial identity, and one was about the emotional psychological constructs of where you put your spirit, if you like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think many mixed people definitely identify with the challenges that you experience even today. I think today there may be additional tools available, but it's a matter of finding it. And a lot of people and a lot of parents have yet to learn about the organizations and the activists and the work that's being done for mixed people. And so a lot of the children still are dealing with a lot of those same issues. And so I appreciate that there are organizations and activists out here doing the work so that children and youth can eventually find that community and that option to identify as and embrace all the traditions and not pick and choose one community or heritage over another one. Are you familiar with Maria Root, the psychologist?
Yeah, the Bill of Rights.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So I think it's a powerful tool just to get that affirmation, because there's a lot of scrutiny about allegiance and decisions and things like that from outside communities when you talk about the mono heritage communities. And so when you're talking about the difficulty that you had dealing with the mono heritage community paradigm, I remember myself growing up. I went to a small private school for my first 11 years of school, and it was comparatively Eurocentric. And that's how I identified myself, because that's just how I saw myself in that context. Then for high school, I go to a large public school, which is comparatively predominantly of people of African descent. And I begin to identify in that respect, because that's what I surround myself in. And it's not until later on, and some might say, well, he's changing camps or whatever else, but it's a matter of that's my surroundings, that's what I know, and also I'm still just learning, and so I'm trying to fit in, and so it's just a matter of accommodating or adapting and adjusting to the circumstances as I learn who I am as an individual.
Yeah.
And so it's a few years later on as a young adult that I begin to say, I'm both of these heritages. I'm all my heritages of my ancestors, and begin to be firm and have a foundation to stand
Yeah.
upon to make
Yeah.
that proclamation. So, um, so I appreciate you articulating that challenge, and also when you talk about religion, again, there becomes that binary of us versus them, or us and them, and there's a certain amount of treatment for those who are in our fold, and then there's a certain amount of a different type of treatment for those who are outside of our fold, and I think that
Yeah.
there's that tendency within each religion of that us and them mentality, and it's difficult to
Yeah.
observe, particularly when people are talking about that kindness and love and everything else that you talk about,
Yeah.
but then are selective with whom the people share it with. So it's a difficult kind of awakening to observe and experience when you see that duality.
There was a formula that I developed out of. So I gathered all of this research from many young people and many voices.
Mhm.
And if you can imagine, I've got all of this data, and I wanted to find a way to make it useful for other people to read and to enjoy and to learn from. So I was able to codify that into a formula.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, what you're asking falls within this formula, which I developed around the mixed identity. And there were 3 sections. So every single person I spoke to experienced one or all 3 of the following stages. And I use my language rather than an academic language. Excuse me.
Okay.
So the first stage was what I call nowhereness, which was some people didn't feel black enough to be black or white enough to be white, for example. And you could say that within religion. Some people don't know if they're in it or out of it.
Sure.
So there was a definite sense of nowhereness where people felt or they didn't know where they fitted in. Stage 2 was what we call somewhereness. So somewhereness was, for me, when people were calling me a nigger at a certain age, when I was maybe a teenager, I thought, okay, if you're going to call me a nigger, then I'm going to be a nigger. And I did what I thought was being a nigger then, which was to grow my hair in the called doo-doo rings, and to what we call doo-doo foot, and talk out the side of my mouth and kiss my teeth and do everything which was non-white. Which obviously wasn't being black. It was being urban more than anything.
Sure.
But what I was doing that somewhereness. So I thought, okay, if I can't be both, I'm going to have to be one or the other. So I was choosing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what people do within religions. You go, okay, well, I'm going to go for this or for that. In the end, where I found peace was a place which we call groundedness. And groundedness, where you take both elements of parent culture and create an identity which isn't specifically like either. And I think that's where I've gotten to now, in that I take all of the spirituality which I've got from my Black Jamaican family and understanding the formulas and the traditions and the rituals within inside church. And I've brought that together with all of the things that my mum has done which are outside of church, and created a grounded sense of just being a good human being.
Sure.
So that formula helped me to understand these categories which were presented to me. And all of the people I spoke to from a mixed race perspective had mostly experienced one or all of those. Some had jumped straight to groundedness, and some felt deeply embracing with it. Others would struggle with it for many years and feel they weren't enough. It was always a sense of not feeling enough, you know?
Right. That's always proving oneself.
Yes. Always proving yourself.
And you know, everybody experiences that in one way or another, I find as well.
Exactly. So you could apply that formula to many different spaces in life. I just chose the mixed race subject because it was something I understood.
Yeah.
And certainly it could go in any setting. And you're talking about development, you're talking about people understanding themselves and how people grow into be a full version of themselves. But that takes time, and it takes the shedding of many skins, and it takes many different failures and successes to get to. But I think I got to it late.
Well, I definitely appreciate what you're sharing, and when you talk about those three stages, I do think that many people can identify with that,
Mm.
and actually, that kind of leads us into the fourth question.
Okay.
Um, so you talk about the third stage of groundedness.
Yes.
So the fourth question is, what are the solutions that you find amidst those challenges as an adult? And you talk about the groundedness. Perhaps you could talk about how you arrive at that experience of groundedness, and some advice that you can share to young people who are still trying to experience that.
Um, there are a couple of things. There are a couple of ways I found this. And when working with young people, I would always say to them that the real you is better than the fake you.
Hmm.
So wherever you are in life, the real you is always going to be better than the fake you. And they would say, well, somebody called me this name and somebody called me that name. And I would respond and say, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what people call you. It's what you choose to respond to.
Mm-hmm.
So you can only respond to something if you know who and what you are. So you have to do that exploration on your own. And your parents and your friends and your family can give you some pointers. But at the end of the day, that core you is locked inside,
Mm.
and you've got to find a way to uncover that.
Yeah.
As an older generation of this population, I kind of feel now that my identity isn't as important as it was when I was younger,
Okay.
because I realize how much my identity is wrapped up in my ego.
Mm.
And actually, my identity is, if you like, it's a boiled egg. It hasn't got a look on it, or a shape, or a size, or a color.
Okay.
I'm a set of values. I'm a nice person, and I like to do certain things, and I get lots of things wrong. But that has nothing to do with race and identity.
Sure.
But I do live in a society where race and identity has an impact on day-to-day living. So I guess my advice is to really be true to yourself, to be very honest, and not to model yourself on somebody else, but to make the what I call making me is make you. So that'll be all of your mother and all of your father. Bring all
Mm.
of those things together, the good and the bad.
Sure.
And equally have fun. Don't lose sight of the fact that race is a social construct. But because things are not real in reality, doesn't mean it's not real in their consequence.
Mm.
So have fun with working out who you are,
Yeah.
but know that underneath all that rubble, you actually are just a spirit, a sense of being.
Awesome. Beautiful. I like that. So, on a kind of a side note, you were involved in organizing or convening a gospel concert recently. Is that correct?
Yes,
So
yes.
can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, um, that came into being for probably totally different reasons than people would imagine.
Okay.
I live in Manchester, and I used to go to London around Christmas time, and London's about a 3-hour drive,
Okay.
which is a long time for people in the UK.
Yeah.
It's a long journey. And I would go there Christmas time, and the London Community Gospel Choir would sing. And I always really enjoyed entering the Christmas season to those sounds. And I
Mm.
used to think it was such a shame, because I was fortunate to have the funds to travel then. I
Mhm.
used to think it was a shame that my friends and family couldn't come and listen to this and were
Ah,
exposed to it. So I decided to bring the singers to Manchester
okay.
so that my people could enjoy it. So
Sure.
I got some singers together, hired a venue, and thought, okay, well, why don't we do this in Manchester once a year? And brother, that's how it happened. Just like that. So really, I wanted to share the experience of hearing those beautiful vocals and a tight band and the positive messages behind it. But lots of my church friends thought I was doing it because it was more of a church-driven
Sure.
experience, and it wasn't. I'm more secular than I am church.
Yeah.
But I also felt that it shouldn't just exist within church, that there are ways that we could all share this
Okay.
and messages from it. And that's where it came from. So, and
Cool.
it's taken off really well, actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you. This is me personally asking.
Yeah.
So when I hear gospel choir or gospel concert,
Mm,
UK,
mm,
I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know what gospel music is like in the United States, uh,
sure.
and I know that it's rooted within the experience of slavery,
Yeah.
and it has that soulfulness, it has that
Mm,
striving, that yearning,
mm,
and a lot of it utilizes Judeo-Christian references,
mm, mm.
but it's also very kind of non-denominational, or just like what it says, spiritual rather than religious.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of the triumph of the soul. And
Correct.
so I think a lot of people, it resonates with a lot of people in a lot of different traditions, particularly, well, in a lot of different traditions,
Mm,
because of that universal experience of triumph, of suffering over suffering, and
yeah.
sorrow and destitution and
Yeah.
everything else. Here's this rebellious, even joyous voice, song,
Yep.
music,
Yeah.
that's triumphant,
Mm,
and that's contagious.
yeah.
So that's my experience of gospel music. I love gospel music. So is
Yeah.
that the same gospel music in the UK? Is it drawing from that same experience, or
All,
what
all of the gospel singers I include in the show are currently on the circuit, so they're doing their work.
Okay.
But often they are not shared with the secular sector.
Okay.
So people do not bring them into non-church going
Mm,
setting. And yes, you're right. The messages they bring forth are really valuable for everyone to hear.
sure.
And from what I've observed, the secular crowd, the non-church crowd, respect the grounding that these singers have had in terms of being able to create these sounds and connect with that part of themselves which makes that sound.
Hmm.
And because of that, they can then take some of those positives from that without feeling they have to become completely church.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
So it really is, it's a sharing, but also similarly, it's nice for the churchgoers who are religious churchgoers to find a way to communicate what's important to them
Right.
in a non-doctrine way, and to almost dilute it so that other people can take some on.
Sure.
In philosophy, they call it the Socratic route, where
Okay.
you take small examples of good things which happen instead of overempowering people or making them feel guilty about not doing the right thing.
Hmm.
Give them small good examples. And I wanted to give people exposure to those who really enjoy gospel singing and those who enjoy hearing it, but you don't have to be doing this all the time.
Cool. Nice. Nice. So that leads us to our fifth question and our concluding question. So we talk about your background, the background of your parents, and some of the lessons that your parents share with you as a child, some of the
Mm,
challenges that you experience as a child and youth, of belonging, identity, and contradiction, and we talk about some of the solutions that you experience. Particularly the three stages, and the groundedness, and the self assurance, the real us, the real individual, the real who we are inside of ourselves, beyond the ego and beyond race and ethnicity and all these other tendencies as spiritual beings. So, with all that considered, what is the message that you have to share with the universe? What is your message?
you are it.
Okay.
You are it. Basically, I think every individual I come into contact with, they are it.
Hmm.
They are consciousness within these thought structures, within this structure of society. So yeah, it's always back to that. The real you will always be better than the fake you. So
Yeah.
take time in to discover who you are and to follow your own light, however you find that. And I think the process of building a social identity when you're mixed race means that oftentimes you have to question yourself in a way that some mono-heritage individuals don't have to question themselves and their place in the universe, in society, in being. And within that, it means you can often stumble across answers in yourself which allow you to live a freer existence and to connect with more different people and to allow barriers to break down if you take those lessons correctly. So it's to keep exploring.
Cool. Thank you very much, Bradley.
Thank you, my brother. I hope that was helpful.
Definitely.